Hi, this is Adam Blaylock, and you're listening to Adam the Movie Guy. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy the show. Warning, the show you're about to listen to contains strong language and an unhinged host. Don't take me too serious, I'm doing a bit here, so stay the fuck off my back. Enjoy. If this shocks you, if this offends you, and you clicked on the wrong fucking podcast. Welcome everyone to another episode of Adam the Movie Guy, and today's episode is covering 1931's Frankenstein, which came out only 9 months after the previous Universal monster film Dracula. Directed by James Whale and starring Colin Clive as Dr. Henry Frankenstein, Mae Clarke as Elizabeth, John Bowles as Victor Moritz, Edward Van Sloan as Dr. Waldman, Frederick Kerr as Baron Frankenstein, Dwight Fry as Fritz, Lionel Belmore as the Burgomaster or Mayor, Marilyn Harris as Maria, and the legend himself, Boris Karloff as the Frankenstein monster. To touch a bit on my feelings on the movie early, this is heads and shoulders above Dracula in my opinion in terms of rewatch factor, and I'll get into that in more detail later on. The format's going to be the same as the previous episodes, such as discussing the plot, characters, trivia, and there's something I really need to get off my chest in regards to the monster, and I can't let this go until I say my piece, so stay tuned to hear me lose my shit over it. So basically another one of my unhinged rants. And last, my thoughts of the film overall and my ranking of it. Well, let's get started with the first segment. Alright, getting into the plot of the movie, the film follows the obsessed scientist Dr. Henry Frankenstein as he attempts to create life by assembling a creature from the body parts of the deceased. Aided by his loyal hunchback assistant Fritz, Frankenstein succeeds in animating his monster, but it escapes into the countryside and accidentally kills a child, causing the whole village to go into a frenzy and hunt it down. Dr. Frankenstein searches for the elusive creature and eventually must confront his tormented creation. This all leads to a confrontation at a burning windmill where the monster throws Dr. Frankenstein off the windmill, gets trapped by debris, and is seemingly killed in the fire. That's the basic overall plot of the movie, but as simple as it sounds, there's a lot of deep complexity in the themes of the film when it comes to religion, science, morality, nature versus nurture, and poses the question of how far one is willing to go to push the boundaries of scientific achievement and to what end. It also asks, what makes one monstrous and who is the real monster of the film? Is it the creature, or is it Dr. Frankenstein for bringing it into a world where it doesn't belong in and would never find acceptance, at least not in that era? Now, far better qualified people than me can explain it much better, so I'm not going to get too heavy into those themes, since this film is something I truly believe that everyone should see at least once in their life. Now, touching upon a plot point in the movie that's pretty crucial and kickstarts the climax is the scene where the monster plays with the little girl Maria by the pond, and the monster sees how the little flowers float in the water. So the monster picks up Maria, throws her into the water thinking she would float just like the flowers, and unfortunately she drowns, and the monster panics and runs away. This scene perfectly illustrates that while the monster isn't evil, he lacks basic understanding and knowledge that he was denied by his creator/father, Dr. Frankenstein. It also leads to this discovery of Maria's body by her father and gets the whole village turned into an angry mob with torches hunting the monster down. Another small moment I wanted to touch on is that during the scene with the monster locked away in the cellar after killing Fritz, who was literally tormenting him with a torch, Dr. Waldman is insisting that they kill the monster, but Dr. Frankenstein, in a very telling moment of dialogue, says that it would be murder. Honestly, I find that very fascinating that in spite of referring to the monster as an it in the previous scene, which dehumanizes him, he truly did not want to kill him and considers him human, at least deep down. Well, since I'm getting into them already, let's officially get into the next segment and talk about the characters. Alright, kicking off with the character segment, let me start off with a 2-for-1 with Mae Clark's Elizabeth and John Bull's Victor. Now, these two have an interesting relationship where Victor clearly wants Elizabeth, but at the same time does seem to have a friendship with Henry, who seems to be aware of Victor's feelings toward Elizabeth in an implied line of dialogue toward the end, when Henry tells Victor to take care of Elizabeth if anything happens to him, and they give each other a knowing look. As for Elizabeth, her loyalty to Henry is pretty damn impressive considering all the bullshit he starts with his experiment. And Mae Clark has this warmth to her character that just makes her likable. And she's very pretty, so points to both her and Henry for managing to pull her. Next up is Dr. Waldman, played by Edward Van Sloan, who just came off of playing Van Helsing in Dracula. His character, while trying to steer Henry away from his obsession, also has an immediate bad opinion of the monster, insisting he should be killed within moments of meeting him. Van Sloan does a good job as Waldman, but to be honest, his Van Helsing is heads and shoulders above this performance. Also, side note, this asshole believes that the monster's brain was a former criminal's, and just because of that, the monster must be evil. Listen to this clip real quick of them talking about it.
Your success has intoxicated you. Wake up and look facts in the face. Here we have a fiend whose brain
must be given time to develop. It's a perfectly good brain, Doctor. Well, you ought to know. It came from your own laboratory.
The brain that was stolen from my laboratory was a criminal brain.
Oh, well, after all, it's only a piece of dead tissue.
Only evil can come of it. Your health will be ruined if you persist in this madness.
I'm astonishingly sane, Doctor.
You have created a monster and it will destroy you.
Patience, patience. I believe in this monster, as you call it. And if you don't, well, you must leave me alone.
But think of Elizabeth, your father.
Elizabeth believes in me. My father, he never believes in anyone. I've got to experiment further. He's only a few days old, remember. So far, he's been kept in complete darkness. Wait till I bring him into the light. Here he comes. Let's turn out the light.
Yeah, for a doctor, he's kind of stupid for thinking that, and that bothers me a lot every time I watch this movie. Next up is Little Maria, who plays a crucial role in the movie in one scene when she gets her fateful encounter with the monster. Her scene with him before her drowning is so wholesome and sweet, it makes me fucking diabetic. She's not afraid of the monster, and even takes his hand, asking for him to play with her. It is so sad that things don't end well for either of them. Now, next up, we got the Baron Frankenstein, Henry's father. He's kind of a cold prick, and while I do believe he cares about his son, at least to a certain degree, I believe he cares more about his reputation and image, and by proxy, the family's more, unfortunately. Which kind of explains why Henry is somewhat detached emotionally and can't relate to his monster kid. Also, the Baron's kind of an asshole to the village burgomaster/mayor for no real reason, which is kind of funny. Take a listen to him being a dick to the mayor.
And how do you know?
If you please, Herr Baron, the Burgomaster.
Well, tell him to go away.
But he says it's important.
Nothing the Burgomaster can say can be of the slightest importance.
Good day, Herr Baron. Fräulein,
Well, what do you want? If it's trouble, go away. I've trouble enough.
Oh, there's no trouble, sir.
What do you mean, no trouble? There's nothing but trouble.
I brought you these flowers,
Thank you, Herr Vogel.
both in my private and official capacities as Burgomaster.
Yes, we know all about that, but what do you want?
Well, what I really want to know is, when will the wedding be, if you please?
Unless Henry comes to his senses, there'll be no wedding at all.
But, Herr Baron, the village is already prepared.
Well, tell him to unprepare.
Oh, but such a lovely bride. Such a fine young man, the very image of his father.
Heaven forbid.
But, sir, everything is ready.
I know that. Don't keep on saying so, you idiot. There's nothing to cry about.
Good day, Miss Elizabeth. Good day, Herr Moritz.
Good day, Herr Vogel.
Good day, Herr Baron.
And good riddance to you.
Seriously, Buddy gave no fucks for his position and had no respect for him. Next up, we got Dwight Fry's Fritz. Now, this guy is a little piece of shit who torments the monster for no fucking reason and annoys the shit out of me. My theory about that is that as a hunchbacked man, Fritz feels like an outcast from society, and here is this monster man he assisted in creating with Dr. Frankenstein, and he feels he's no longer on the lowest rung of the ladder in society. Honestly, Dwight Fry is a great actor and is pretty damn good range from going from Renfield and Dracula to Fritz and Frankenstein. His character gets what he fucking deserves when the monster hung his ass in his cell, to be honest. Now, getting into the big heavy hitter of the movie, we got Dr. Henry Frankenstein himself, played to perfection by Colin Clive. Oh, man, what really needs to be said about this legendary performance by Clive? Dr. Frankenstein is so damn captivating and charismatic in every single scene he is in that he is without a doubt the standout in the movie, with the close second being his created son, funny enough. From telling his experiments to Dr. Waldman.
Dr. Waldman, I learned a great deal from you at the university about the violet ray, the ultraviolet ray, which you said was the highest color in the spectrum. You were wrong. Here in this machinery, I have gone beyond that. I have discovered the great ray that first brought life into the world.
Oh, and your proof?
Tonight you shall have your proof. At first I experimented only with dead animals, and then a human heart, which I kept beating for 3 weeks. But now, I'm going to turn that ray on that body and endow it with life.
And you really believe that you can bring life to the dead?
That body is not dead. It has never lived. I created it. I made it with my own hands from the bodies I took from graves, from the gallows, anywhere. Go and see for yourself.
To his pure, hysterical state of ecstasy when his creation shows the first sign of life, and he utters one of the most famous lines in film history. Take a listen to it real quick.
It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. In the name of God. Now I know what it feels like to be God.
Incredible. And his scene with Dr. Waldman when explaining his motive and drive behind his experiment, it is, in my opinion, his most powerful scene in the movie. Take a listen to it.
Have you never wanted to do anything that was dangerous? Where should we be if nobody tried to find out what lies beyond? You never wanted to look beyond the clouds and the stars, or to know what causes the trees to bud, and what changes a darkness into light? But if you talk like that, people call you crazy. Well, if I could discover just one of these things, what eternity is, for example, I wouldn't care if they did think I was crazy.
And despite of his manic state, He remains sympathetic throughout the film, especially when he shares scenes with Elizabeth, his fiancée. I truly believe, at least this is me personally, I believe, that he didn't have any ill intent behind his experiment. Quite the contrary, actually. I mean, it's unfortunate that he took things way too far in disturbing people's graves, and that is pretty fucked up, I can't lie and defend that. Last thing to note about his character is he got off pretty easy considering his crimes, and despite me being sympathetic to him, he really should have had faced some repercussions. Although, I don't think the village knew about his involvement in the monster's creation until much later, when we get to part 3, Son of Frankenstein, but I'll get to that when I get to that movie. Now, last but certainly not least, we have the monster himself, played by another legend, Boris Karloff. The same exact praise should be given to Karloff, and maybe more in a few areas, considering he had to do all this physical acting with no dialogue. I mean, from the get-go, the monster is sympathetic, but also intimidating as all hell with his gaping, empty stare. His scene with Maria was, in my opinion, the best scene in the movie with his character, and says all that needs to be said about his character in that specific moment. He's just such a tragic figure that every time I watch the movie, I want things to work out for him, but unfortunately it can't no matter what the fuck he does. Oh, and his development in the sequel is so damn interesting, and I can't wait to talk about him in Bride. Well, guys, that's all for the character segment. Let's move on to the next. Alright guys, I want to get into some trivia in the form of Did You Know? And my favorite parts of these episodes, me going on an unhinged rant about something about the Frankenstein monster in general that never fails to annoy the absolute shit out of me, and it's a debate that's been going on since his creation. But first things first, let's get some trivia out the way. Starting with the first Did You Know? Trivia tidbit. Did you know that Bela Lugosi, hot off of playing Dracula, was supposed to play the monster before Boris Karloff eventually got cast? It even went as far as having footage shot in a test scene with a radically different makeup resembling a golem from the Jewish faith, with clay-like skin and a large wig. Unfortunately, the footage is lost. As for Bela Lugosi, the story is that he didn't want to play the monster due to not having speaking lines, to which I personally call bullshit on. They actually touch upon this in the bonus feature documentary in the Blu-ray release of the movie. Take a listen to it real quick. Next, did you know that the famous moment of Dr. Frankenstein saying he knows what it feels like to be God when the monster is brought to life was censored in re-releases a couple of times in the 1930s, and it stayed that way for years, all the way up until 1986, where it was finally restored on home video. Thank God, too. Next, did you know that Dr. Frankenstein was supposed to die when thrown off the mill by the monster, but they ended up going with the happy ending of him surviving? Next, did you know that the monster in the book doesn't have a full description of what he physically looks like, other than his large size being 8 feet tall, almost see-through yellowish skin, black hair and black lips, and prominent white teeth? The design in the movie was created in full by legendary monster makeup man Jack Pierce, who came up with the droopy eyes, flat head, the electrodes in the neck, and the smaller chute in the extremely heavy, thick boots. And that look is also legally copyrighted to Universal Studios until 2026, and then it will be in the public domain, so literally any Tom, Dick, and Jane could use that specific look for the Frankenstein monster, to which I personally can't wait for. Next, did you know that Boris Karloff, famous for playing a monster who's supposed to be a bare minimum of 7 feet and 8 feet in the book, in real life, he was actually a relatively modest 5'11" to 6 feet tall in his prime of his life. The heavy boots boosted his height along with camera angles and good use of platforms to make him seem bigger than he actually was. And it's funny to think that both Bela Lugosi at 6'1" and Lon Chaney Jr. at 6'2.5" were taller than Karloff. Well, that's all for the trivia segment. Now let's get into something I've been wanting to get off my chest for a while in regards to the Frankenstein monster character. Ooh, settle in for this rant. I can't wait. Okay, you stuck with me this long and nobody's gonna give or remember a rat's ass with what I'm about to say within 15 fucking minutes, so let me just get this out of my system and say this to all the jackasses out there who nitpick every fucking thing. The monster's name. Now let me start off by saying that yes, technically you would be correct by saying that he doesn't have a name. Okay, good for you, pal. He is often called the monster or Frankenstein's monster or creature or pulling out some fucking book references, fiend, thing, demon. I think he called him ogre at one point, whatever the fuck. However, to say that referring to the monster as Frankenstein is inaccurate is fucking ludicrous. And I'll tell you why, so everyone who disagrees and wants to keep correcting people online or in person whenever someone discusses Frankenstein just so they can suck themselves off about it can understand my reasoning at the very least. The reason why I say it's not inaccurate to refer to the monster as Frankenstein is simple. He was created by Dr. Frankenstein, so Dr. Frankenstein is considered his father essentially. Ergo, he is a Frankenstein, and don't give me that literal not by blood bullshit argument because that's fucking irrelevant to the relationship and has nothing to do with the monster's origin. For fuck's sakes, Universal Studio themselves have referred to the monster as Frankenstein a few times, and somehow people have a problem with that. When this gets brought up and some jagoff feels the need to be like, actually the monster's name isn't Frankenstein, it boils my fucking blood and makes me want to do a Jim Cornette.
And I want to just slap these motherfuckers. They should be thrown screaming from helicopters in front of their fucking families.
Seriously, you really felt the need to open your wide fuckhole and spew those words from your mouth? And for what? To feel smarter than the other person? And don't get me started with those pretentious pricks who reference the book like it's their fucking trump card for their argument, and they get a Woody because they can read above a 9th grade level.
Oh, good for you! And how was it? I hope it was fucking good because it's useless now, isn't it?
I recall listening to this YouTuber fuck, I don't know his name, I don't give a shit. He was talking about this very subject, and he had the same TikTok brain rot opinion of saying about that calling the monster Frankenstein or referring to him as Frankenstein is wrong when no the fuck it isn't. And before anyone tries to be a fucking smartass and point out how I've been referring to him as the monster myself in this episode, the only reason I've been doing that, and listen to me closely, is to avoid confusion between Frankenstein, the doctor, and Frankenstein, the monster. You want to only refer to him as the monster? Fine. But stop running your dick liquor and saying that referring to the monster as Frankenstein is wrong when no the fuck it isn't. Seriously, hearing that jackass in the car while driving on my way to work had me feeling like fucking Christian Bale in the movie Harsh Times.
These fucking assholes, these fucking assholes! The fuck is their problem, man?
In conclusion, the monster can be referred to as Frankenstein, and whenever I see online or hear in person that people say he can't, I swear on Boris Karloff, it makes me fight the fucking urge to grab a baseball bat and have that motherfucker who said that look like Mickey Rourke after his face surgery. Rant over. Sorry you had to hear that, but this just activates my inner Nancy and fills me with rage. For those of you who don't know, Nancy is my mom's name, and she had a hell of a temper if somebody pissed her off, and she never gave two shits telling that person what she thinks. God, I miss her, and I hope she's laughing at me losing my shit about trivial things in heaven while also watching these movies that we were both really fond of and doing together. Well, That's enough of me being a sentimental nut job. Let's get into the final segment before I have an aneurysm from this shit. I need to lay down. Alright guys, let me bring it on home and give my final thoughts and ranking. This film is without a doubt essential viewing for everyone. You need to watch this film at least once in your life, it's that much of a classic. I think it's so well done, and the performances of Colin Clive and Boris Karloff will be remembered forever in regards to film history. To me, it beats Dracula by a mile in terms of being entertaining and rewatchable. This is the Frankenstein that all other adaptations are measured by and compared to, and for good reason. And not to skip too much ahead, what makes this even more impressive is that James Whale, the director, somehow manages to improve upon perfection when he made the sequel Bride of Frankenstein, which I cannot wait to get to. The final rating of the film, in the form of 0 to 5 lightning bolts, is going to be 4.5 lightning bolts out of 5. This movie truly is great and deserves every ounce of praise I'm giving it. Well guys, that's the end of the show. Next episode is going to be a micro-sized one since I'm covering a Universal film that I just never could get into no matter how many times I rewatch it, and that is 1932's The Mummy. Following that, I'll cover The Invisible Man, then Bride of Frankenstein, then Son of Frankenstein, The Wolfman, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and then finally Creature from the Black Lagoon. Now I know I'm skipping a shit ton of the sequels, but I honestly wanted to cover the heaviest hitters first. But I promise I will cover those missing films someday, even if it takes another year for me to get around to it doing so by next October. I also want to talk about the Hammer Horror Studios and their take on some of the classic monsters. Well, thanks for listening, guys, and tune in next episode.